Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint. My name is Chris Monk, and I will be your worship associate today. This is not a congregation that celebrates a creed, but celebrates the open mind and the loving heart. We welcome people who are looking for a truth that makes sense to them, that will celebrate social justice and the betterment of the world. We practice inclusiveness. No matter your race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, or disability, you are welcome here. We do have a set of principles that we follow that you will find on our website, like the inherent worth and dignity of every person and the respect for the interdependent web of all existence. If you would like to know more about us, check out our website, our Facebook page, or call one of our ministers. Now we have quite a few announcements today. He's back. Delma's with us today. It's been almost 2 years since we've had him here, and we are so excited that he's back. Mr. Jackson is a keen observer of current events and is able to bring a historical perspective to a vision of the future. Always intellectually challenging with a twist of dry humor. Delma is a facilitator, writer, and lecturer on social justice topics. He has presented at New York University, Toledo University, the University of Michigan-Flint, the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity in Higher Education, Utrecht University, and the United States Conference on AIDS, Dartmouth College, and Yale University's School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. It's too bad you're never busy, Delma. Delma's research background includes African American studies, American pop culture, Afro-Dutch identity, and migration and immigration in Europe. We're not done. Thank you, Jennifer. That was beautiful. We jumped ahead of you. I'm sorry. Another announcement is a reminder of the DreamWork class that starts this Wednesday, January 26th at 6 p.m. on Zoom. It will be led by Reverend Jerry. For more information, check your e-update or your website. We have a congregational meeting next Sunday, January 30th at 11 a.m. It will be an in-person meeting or on YouTube, but it's not going to be on Zoom. So you either need to be here. If you can come and be in person, that would be great. There's a survey going out at the beginning of this week. And if you can fill it out and send it back as soon as possible, that would be great. It's not going to take long, just a couple minutes, just a couple questions, like what time do you prefer the service starts, 10 o'clock or 10:30? And the board would like the information back so they can use it next Sunday when we have the meeting. Lastly, next week's service is titled Just My Type with Jerry and Lynn. Please remember that if you want to, you can take the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator test online and send your results to Lynn or Jerry. A link to the online test site is in your e-update. We hope that you can join us, and it promises to be a fun-filled service. All right, now we will light our chalice. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Thank you. Would you please join me in reciting our covenant? Recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me I am somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me I am somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind,
Now's our time for meditation. After I read these words, we're going to have 60 seconds of silence. And when Jennifer starts playing, you can come forward and light a candle in the front, or you can light one in the back. It can be a candle for joys, sorrows, remembrances, whatever's special to you. So, Jennifer, keep track of 60 seconds for me.
Sure.
Every person needs to take one day away, a day in which one consciously separates the past from the future. Jobs, family, employers, and friends can exist one day without any one of us. And if our egos permit us to confess, they could exist eternally in our absence. Each person deserves a day away in which no problems are confronted, no solutions searched for. Each of us needs to withdraw from the cares which will not withdraw from us. Words by Maya Angelou. Is for all the joys and concerns that are held in our hearts and are unspoken. This reading is an Irish poem. The author is unknown, but it was very relevant to what Delma will be speaking about today. If the mountain seems too big today, then climb a hill instead. If the morning brings you sadness, it's okay to stay in bed. If the day ahead weighs heavy and your plans feel like a curse, there's no shame in rearranging. Don't make yourself feel worse. If a shower stings like needles and a bath feels like you'll drown, if you haven't washed your hair in days, don't throw away your crown. A day is not a lifetime. A rest is not defeat. Don't think of it as failure, just a quiet, kind retreat. It's okay to take a moment from an anxious, fractured mind. The world will not stop turning while you get realigned. The mountain will still be there when you want to try again. So climb it in your own time and love yourself till then.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to try to turn on this lapel mic and hope that I don't get a ton of feedback. On the top. All right. All right. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Good. Chris, how are we on time?
You've got all the time. We're ahead. You got a half hour. Go for it.
All right. I don't know. I don't know that I'll need half an hour, but let's just see what happens. It is good to be back.
Good to have you back. Yes.
Thank you. It's been a long time.
Yes.
Too long. This virus has taken its toll. And unbeknownst to me at least, life has managed not to call a time out for the sake of our collective recovery. It has continued forward, virus aside. The artist and activist, typically known as Banksy, who's based out of the UK but does his work internationally, has a quote that I love so much. I actually have it framed in my home. He said, "If you get tired, learn to rest, not quit." COVID has been exhausting on multiple levels. We have lost loved ones. Every time we think we might be moving on, we get a brand new variant. We have made our way through quite a bit of the Greek alphabet already. I listen to NPR regularly, and one of the things that is often discussed is the debates all over the country about schools opening, then schools closing, opening again, closing again. Parents have mixed views, teachers mixed views, administrations and school boards have ideas, and students themselves, most recently in cities like New York, actually organized and walked out of their school because they did not feel safe being called to come in on a daily basis, while parents of younger children are often scrambling to figure out childcare and how to hold down a job. I find myself trying to live life as best I can, as normally as I can, and feeling frustrated when I go in certain public spaces and we see the maskless. But I've also been the maskless. And it's funny how my feelings about that change depending on which decision I make. I can be real judgmental, even as I watch myself make similar decisions sometimes. I thought, like if you've ever seen The Matrix, I thought I was like Neo when they shot all the bullets and he stopped them. I had made it into 2022 without COVID. Well, let me rephrase that. I had made it to December of 2021 without COVID, only to be hit a week before Christmas. And for me, fortunately, being fully vaccinated, I had a relatively brief stint. And by Christmas Day, I was able to smell and taste my food again. But for me, that was the hardest part. Obviously, we know that for many, it is much, much worse. Just recently, we've had to say goodbye to some extremely influential people on a more public stage. Just recently, we've had to say goodbye to Sidney Poitier, whose work was tremendous in paving the way for those who would come behind him, whose work has so much to say about race, class in America at a time where very few people wanted to hear from someone who looked like him. We had to say goodbye to Bell Hooks, who framed race and love and accountability in a way that I had never encountered prior to reading her work, Ain't I a Woman?, which changed my life. If you have not invested time in Bell Hooks' work, I would strongly recommend it. And most recently, that I'm aware of, we had to say goodbye to Titch, Nighthawk, one of the most single-minded, laser-like focused, powerful individuals in service of love that this world has known, whose work was extremely influential in the lives of so many people, including the brother we just recently celebrated, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who quoted Thich Nhat Hanh often and spoke highly of him often and met with him whenever possible. We watched our government fail to pass the most basic of voting rights, even as we see states all over the country set us back generations. We said goodbye to John Lewis. We've long said goodbye to MLK And yet we find ourselves in pockets all over the country facing similar obstacles that we hadn't seen since the 1960s. It has been exhausting. It has been physically exhausting, mentally, spiritually exhausting. Perhaps what is most insidious about this time we are in is that we have not had the opportunity to mourn collectively for all that we have lost, because the rate at which we are losing is so great. And one cannot very well pause to mourn when what we need to mourn is ongoing. When we cast back, for those of us old enough to remember 9/11, we lost somewhere around 3,000 individuals, and as a nation, we collectively took the time to mourn. As of the last time I looked, just in the US alone, we have lost 850,000 people. We are nearing the 1 million mark. And we have not been able, most of us, to mourn. The lack of mourning provides, among other things, the lack of an opportunity to heal from that which has so traumatized us. And it is healing that we so desperately need. And yet the world still demands that we show up. I just fed my children yesterday, and yet they're going to want to eat again today. The audacity. To that end, Stephen King has a quote. He said, "In the service of duty, there was never any acceptable reason for denial." In the service of duty, there is never any acceptable reason for denial. I would argue that we have built a culture that has taken that sentiment and placed it collectively on our backs. We celebrate those who would work themselves to death and admonish those who have the audacity to rest. I remember sometimes my father would often hang out in the basement of the house and watch the games or whatever, especially like on a Sunday, right? Catch some football. And I'd ask him, I'd say, "Dad, what you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm just resting like a white man." When I was little, I didn't understand what he was saying. As I aged, I began to appreciate what that meant. He was speaking to a certain audacity, right? How dare he take up space to what? To rest. Because only certain people, right, get to do that. I was recently speaking with a group who does great conservation work in the Northeast. And part of what I'm trying to get them to understand is that the foundations of conservation in this country are deeply rooted in white supremacy. And the idea that if you are both white and wealthy enough, you should be able to have pristine space to enjoy, while the rest of us toil and labor for your greater wealth and benefit. Bell Hooks said regularly, and I'm paraphrasing here, she said, well, she would often say, black women specifically were the pack mules of the planet. I would argue that if we zoom out, set race aside just for a moment, I would say women are often the pack mules of the planet. When we consider the way we have built whole institutions around recreation, around gender, it's fascinating. What is play for us becomes professionalized, invested in. In fact, I've heard it argued that 10,000 years from now, when that civilization is trying to figure out what our priorities were, what it is we place the most value on, they may very well confuse houses of worship with our stadiums. Think about that. 10,000 years from now, if nothing else is standing, we will have coliseums from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we can't blame anybody if they think these were houses of worship, because that's how invested we are in the recreation of men. But if a mom says, I need a break, she probably feels guilty for saying it, because that is the world we have created. And if she doesn't, then we will do our best to try to make her feel guilty for saying it won't. In the service of duty, there was never any acceptable reason for denial. We celebrate the men who go off to war, wars they don't necessarily support or understand. We celebrate the men who go into these laborious spaces and do coal mining and work on the assembly lines until their bodies are absolutely broken. All in the service of what? An economy. We brag about never missing work. I never take a day off. And we wear that as a badge of honor. Oops. We apply this idea to everyone except ourselves. We tend to be most neglectful to ourselves. How much time have we spent trying to produce for someone else? But I have a question for you this morning. What if our duty was our healing? What if each one of us took responsibility for our own healing? What kind of world will we live in? Do you think it would be a better one? I do. Rest in Power, the brother Titch in his book, How to Rest, notes that calming is what allows us to rest, and in resting, we serve a precondition for healing. Resting as a precondition for healing. How many of you now need a healing? I certainly do. Because if there's ever been a time in recent history where healing is called for, I would argue it is now. We are indeed collectively exhausted. We need rest, yet life continues to make its demands of us. And we tell ourselves, I don't have time. I have responsibilities. I have this, I have that, I must do this, I must do that. Prioritizing everything outside of ourselves, never or rarely taking the time to prioritize us. And we wonder why we're so exhausted. We wonder why we burnt out. We wonder why we're less patient. We're wondering why things just don't feel right. Why is my health falling apart? I've known several people in my life who tried this whole resting idea, but could not seem to grasp the concept because they spent the entire time they were resting worrying about what? What they should be doing instead. It defeats the purpose. That is not rest. That is seated anxiety. Very different thing. One must come to fully understand that in order to truly rest, you have to embrace the idea that perhaps your healing should be prioritized. Perhaps if you want to truly be of service to the people in your life, you are better serving them when you are at your best. And you cannot be at your best when you are in need of a healing. And you cannot heal when you are in need of rest. So, what if we were to take King's quote and put it in that context? In the service of duty, there was never any acceptable reason for denial. Not the duty of others, but duty to one's self. Not quitting, but resting. Planning ahead to be able to do so. I don't know about you all, but there have been times where I thought I might have been close to resting, and this device pulled me right out of it so fast. I have learned in recent years to simply cut this thing off. And it felt weird at first. Amazing how quickly we can become accustomed to this contraption. Amazing how the easier it is to communicate with one another, the more obligated we feel to do so. I'm just old enough to remember life before these. And there was a sense of freedom, right? You had to catch me at a certain place. The universe had to align for us to talk. You could leave me a message, but guess what? I get to check it when I'm ready. Now I carry my answering machine in my pocket at all times. And if the phone don't work, they'll text me. And if texting don't work, they'll reach me on Facebook Messenger. And if that doesn't work, they'll try calling me again. And I feel bad when I cut the thing off, even if my children are home with me. Those I am actually responsible for, their care and their upbringing, even when they're home with me, I feel bad for cutting off the rest of the world. I feel obligated to respond in a timely manner. Maybe I'm alone in that. Can any of you relate to that? Or? Oh, okay. All right. I just want to make sure. It is difficult to rest in a world where we can reach out and touch one another so quickly. There was a time before Zoom. If you had a pandemic, it was just understood that certain things was going to have to take a pause. Now I spend day after day after day staring at boxes like the opening episode of the Brady Bunch. People forgetting they left their mic on and saying weird stuff. Or they leave their mic off and start trying to talk to you, and you're like, This is a strange world we live in. These are strange times. And I think the older we get, the more removed we feel from how strange it actually is. How different it is from what we've known up to this point. And we're trying to make sense of it because we want to stay connected. We want to stay relevant, right? I wouldn't argue Zoom is necessarily a bad thing. It's allowed us to stay in touch with those we care about. Right? It's not the tool itself. The question is, how are we using it? And at what point does it begin to use us? I'm going to invite you to plan ahead. I'm going to invite you to look at your calendar and figure out a day where we take the advice of Titch, who says it is worth planning a day with no plans and allowing life to unfold in its natural rhythm, that we might feel reconnected to the earth upon which we walk, and let every step we take be a kiss to the earth. Let every step we take be a kiss to the earth. That is a beautiful invitation. Because I stomp around. I got places to go, stuff to do. One could argue I'm abusive to the very planet that is holding me up because I give it no regard. I am inviting all of us to take the time to find space to reconnect to ourselves, to the planet that supports us, that sustains us, to do some healing. Matter of fact, I'm going to invite us to take a little bit of healing time every day, a little more healing time once a week, a little more healing time once a month, and once a year, just disappear if you can. Once a year. The offering you gave us earlier, right? A call to remember that life will go on, that these things will be just fine without us. That is what I am inviting each of us into. We can't fully embrace that concept if we don't lean into it, if we don't experiment with it, if we don't give it a shot. So I'm inviting you to take a few minutes every day, an hour a week, a few hours a month, and maybe a day or two a year. Prioritize yourself. Prioritize your healing. Be an example to the others in your life that this matters not just for you, but it matters to them too. They can't embrace this concept by us telling them. They have to see us. For some of you, I understand that such an invitation will bring up tremendous anxiety. You're already thinking about all the reasons you can't afford to do that. Yeah, that's cute and all, but my life is too demanding. I keep doing this. That's a cute invitation. It's a nice idea conceptually, but life will not allow me that space. I would argue that if that is how we feel, then the question becomes, are we actually living? Is that life? That's what we think life is? That's why we got this one shot? That's the whole reason we came to be, was to work ourselves into non-being? We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to one another. We owe it to the planet that sustains us. We owe it to our spirit. Be stingier with yourself. And take the time to love on yourself just a little bit so that you're better prepared to love on those around you. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you, Delma. It's so good to have you back to challenge us, to wake us up to what's really going on. It is so true. If I have a free day, I feel so much anxiety because I feel like I should be doing something. And we just don't know how to do that. But thank you. Our time for generosity. We offer our gifts of time, talent, and treasure to work for justice, to create a safe space for all who come to explore and to heal those who are hurting. We invite you to join us as we take the collection by placing your offering in the basket at the back of the church, or leave us a gift online at uuflint.org. And all gifts, no matter what they are gratefully accepted. For the closing words, I'm going to read Maya Angelou's words again. Every person needs to take one day away, a day in which one consciously separates the past from the future. Jobs, family, employers, and friends can exist one day without any one of us. And if our egos permit us to confess, they could exist eternally in our absence. Each person deserves a day away in which no problems are confronted, no solutions searched for. Each of us needs to withdraw from the cares which will not withdraw from us. We'll now extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.